Hi guys, it's G-Economics here. It's been a while since my last upload, but today we're once again back fresh with the A593 stimulus material, and we're looking at what I consider to be the second half of this stimulus. We've already looked at current account, exchange rates, trade, World Trade Organization and protectionism. And now we move into what I would consider to be the second part of this stimulus material, whereby we're looking really at development economics, poverty levels, the role of NGOs, the role of aid, all of the factors which can be used to alleviate poverty in the global economy. So today I'm going to look at this particular chart with you, which is figure 6, I believe. And we're mostly going to be focused here on the area of the specification to do with poverty here. Now do remember that you can only be asked what's on the specification. So there are actually only 1, 2, 3 bullet points on poverty. Explain absolute and relative, explain the difference between them, and then discuss and evaluate some of the policies that can be used to alleviate absolute and relative poverty. Or to alleviate poverty, actually, is what it says. So don't forget that your questions on the paper are very much tied into these particular bullet points. Now, in my slide presentation, I came up with a number of questions for my students, which you can see here. If you want to freeze frame, you can have a look at these. Define absolute poverty, pretty unlikely, it's defined in the case study. Define relative poverty, yeah, might be asked that. Calculate the number of people living on less than $1.90 a day in 1981. You might get asked a mathematical question like that. I just threw that in to get my students really to do some maths based upon the figures that are in the case study. And we're making various assumptions about the size of the population in 81 compared to 2000 and whatever it was. 15, I think, is the quoted number. 2015 in the case study. I think we worked that out as about 3.2 billion. So you can have a look at that yourselves. Decade in which poverty levels fell most rapidly. You know, sometimes they do throw relatively easy questions like that in. And then the estimated figure for 2030 shows a levelling off of the decline and states and explain 2 reasons why that might be the case. So let's have a look at the stimulus material. Here it is. You've got absolute poverty defined here already, living on less than $1.90 a day. So it's pretty unlikely that you're going to be asked to regurgitate that and copy that out in the exam paper. But you might be asked to explain, therefore, what's relative poverty. So relative poverty, the textbook definition tells us that it is whereby a household is living on less than 60% of a country's median income. So in the UK, you're looking at, let's say, 26,000, maybe something like that. And 60% of that, you're going to be knocking on the door of £15,000. So if you're living on less than that as a household, you'd be said to be in relative poverty, relative to the other households in the country. Interestingly, if you were to work full-time on the government's national minimum wage, you would probably, as a household, one person would bring in about £15,000. So the government clearly sees that level of the minimum wage as a level which is just enough to put you on or just above that threshold of relative poverty, which is an interesting policy, obviously, response to the whole notion of poverty. So what does this chart show us? Well, it shows us clearly that the percentage of the global population living in absolute poverty has been on the decline. So we're going right back to 1981 here, and then forecasted through to 2030. Interesting to note, really, in terms of the rate of decline, the most steep and the steepest rate of decline is in the 2000s here, between 2000 and 2010, where it's clearly declined very significantly. Now, one of the reasons why it has declined so significantly since 1980 has been to do with the growth of the emerging markets, but particularly China. With such a vast population of 1.3, 1.4 billion people, when the economy started to grow and develop and to open up to other world markets, that obviously enables the country to lift people out of absolute poverty. So a significant proportion of the number of people coming out of absolute poverty have been in China. However, do not make the mistake of saying that absolute poverty has declined globally simply because of the growth of China. That is not the case. Globally, we've made significant inroads into absolute poverty, and it is not just due to the growth of China. And we can then see a levelling off of it here. Now, when we're talking in my class this morning about this, there are a few reasons why that might be forecast to be the case. So if you think of sub-Saharan Africa, which appears in the next data set, figure 7, where you have very, very entrenched poverty, which is very, very difficult to eradicate. And because of that, then you get a levelling off, because it's so difficult to bring these people out of those levels of poverty. Countries need to trade to grow and develop and bring people out of poverty. Well, we're seeing, particularly at the moment in the global economy, a reining in from globalisation, what we've referred to in the past as deglobalisation. And so if countries can't trade and sell their products and their wares, then again that makes it increasingly difficult to bring your population out of absolute poverty, those living still in absolute poverty. It makes it very difficult to bring them out of that. Some countries, of course, do not have effective means of collecting, for example, taxation as well. And so therefore, if you want to bring people out of poverty by redistributing tax to the less well off, well, if you can't collect, if you don't have the means to collect the tax and you don't have the financial markets necessary to do that and to redistribute it, then that's obviously a big problem. And that is very much the case in developing nations where financial intermediaries and financial markets are very underdeveloped, if developed at all. There's no sources of microfinance, etc. So those are all things that you could say and think about with regard to this chart. And then obviously you might think, well, what are the appropriate policy responses here? And what can governments nationally and internationally, what can they do in order to eradicate poverty levels? So you can think in a number of different ways. You can think about the national minimum wage, obviously, in our own economy. You can think about this whole notion of a living wage, which would put you that little bit above that whole £15,000 threshold of relative poverty. So that's something to think about. You can think about the redistribution effects of taxation, giving it to those who have nothing by way of means-tested benefits. Now, obviously, the universal credit and the universal means-tested benefits are, because of austerity measures, they're less generous. And so the ability to bring people out of absolute poverty is falling in that respect also. We, of course, as a nation, we give foreign aid, but of course foreign aid budgets are being tightened down and hammered down as well in times of austerity, and this increasingly sort of insular-looking society rather than outward-looking and helping and trading and so on. And again, these foreign aid budgets are being cut back all the time, so that again is falling by the wayside. And indeed, the reliance actually to deliver improvements in standards of living, particularly for people in the developed world, comes from their family members who live and work in countries such as the UK, and the monies which they remit, or remittances as we could recall them, back to their families in the developing world, and that helps to bring them out of absolute poverty. And the onus is becoming more and more decentralised from the government and pushed on to the families and friends of those who actually live in those countries. So I think that's really all what we're going to say at this moment on this chart, ladies and gentlemen. When we get to the next one, where we're looking at the breakdown of, well, I'll just bring it on. We'll get to the breakdown where we're doing a sort of region by region globally analysis here. We can say a little bit more about the specific regions, why these specific regions have experienced faster and slower rates of improvements in absolute poverty, and then talk a bit more about policies. So I think I'll leave it at that, ladies and gents. If you don't already subscribe, obviously I would always do appreciate the subscription. Lots of you have been emailing me so email hello@geekonomics.co.uk just with regard to questions, and also if you would like any of the slide presentations, for example. I'm in the middle of finishing off some practice papers as well, and they'll be available on my website, geekonomics.co.uk/resources. That's all coming soon as well. So I hope your revision is going well. Obviously we're really in the heart of revision preparation time now. So I hope it's going well, and see you next time.